It feels so good to rest. In a world that is so busy, especially here in my side of town in Miami, life can get pretty hectic. Sometimes you just want to slow down, pause, and just rest. But if we want to be honest, it's a difficult thing to do, right? Work, school, family, church, chores, homework, helping this person, helping that person, trying to beat traffic and making it on time for the next appointment. It can be pretty exhausting. But how would it make you feel if I told you that there is a pattern of rest that is proven to be effective? To truly understand the rest pattern phenomenon, we must go back to the beginning. God, Elohim, who is the creator of the universe, including you and me, has deemed it necessary that his creation rests every so often to sort of create an equilibrium, a balance for its functioning, its well-being, if you will. So he himself set the example of what a work week should look like. In the book of Genesis, it tells us, "Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done." Verse 2 could have easily ended with God ended his work which he had done. Why did the author feel it necessary to add, "and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done"? I believe God was emphasizing on the need to rest. And this rest goes beyond a daily siesta or an arbitrary break. It is supposed to be a complete 24-hour break that should happen every 7-day cycle. It is true that God ended his work in 6 days, and he did not need to work another week to start another creation per se, but he knew that we would need to work week after week after week to provide for ourselves materially. And so, God did not intend for the earth and its inhabitants to become continual producing machines, never ending, never stopping, always going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days or 366 days a year. Just saying it seems so tiring. Hence, God established the 1 in 7 pattern for us so that we do not kill ourselves in the process of working. Better yet, the idea of resting or taking it easy would increase our quality of life. On the flip side, avoiding this universal, simultaneous cessation of work would increase the wear and tear on our planet and shorten our lifespan significantly. Even much later after creation, when God had gathered the Jews as a people unto himself, he gave them the command to let the ground itself rest every 7 years. We can read that in Leviticus. 6 years you shall sow your field and prune your vineyard and gather its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath unto the land, a Sabbath unto the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor prune your vineyard. In so doing, the earth, the ground, became even more fertile in the following year after the rest. In this text we've just read, we've been introduced to another name for rest: Sabbath. And now the Sabbath becomes this universal notion that was not only for humans and the ground, but also for beasts. Yes, God cares even about the well-being of beasts. On the Sabbath, not only people needed to rest, but the animals did as well. The book of Deuteronomy tells us, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it, You shall not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates, that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. This text is also showing that not only people should rest themselves from their work, but they were not to cause others who were subordinate and subservient to them, such as servants and animals, to work either. Thus, the evidence shows that the 1 in 7 pattern we call the Sabbath is seriously intended for rest. But is the Sabbath only intended for physical rest? I believe there is also a spiritual dimension to the Sabbath rest. The author of Hebrews seems to be making a case for a spiritual rest in Hebrews 4. Verse 1 says, "Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear, lest any of you seem to have come short of it." Verse 7 presents a parallel in saying, "Since therefore it remains that some must enter it, and those to whom it was first preached did not enter because of disobedience." This dimension of rest seems to be based on faith, belief or disbelief, obedience or disobedience. In the physical sense, the Sabbath rest is connected to the idea that God can be trusted to provide whatever is lacking from the overall achievement of the work week, instead of pushing oneself to the extreme. What you're seeing behind me is the Port of Miami. Hundreds of billions of dollars pass through it every year. Shutting it down for one day would mean losing billions of dollars. And because international commerce and the industrial world in general are such key components to the global economy, physically stopping all operations for one day seems like an impossible thing to do. But when an operation is based on trusting God and not the dollar, the workers will cease from their work regardless of what is left to do, and trust God to help them make up for the rest, or for He Himself to provide the rest. In the spiritual sense, however, that same person keeping the Sabbath is saying that they trust God's finishing work of creation as well as His work of redemption. They rest from trying to save themselves. And that is what Christ was trying to teach the believers of His day when He said to them, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden. I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Up until now, we've talked about rest, the Sabbath rest, in a physical and spiritual sense. But the Sabbath also has a legal facade to it. I believe the Sabbath implicates the parameter of God's jurisdiction on creation. The Sabbath shows that God is the rightful owner of the universe. In the legal system, there is this notion of adverse possession, which is also known as squatters' rights. And the way it works is that a person who does not have a legal title to a piece of property may acquire legal ownership based on continuous possession or occupation of the property without the permission of its legal owner, as long as it's within the statutes of limitation period. Imagine someone taking over one of these condos. And so, as Satan, being the prince of this world, tries to lay claim on this world through continuous possession or occupation, that is, by making people think that the world was not created by God, whenever someone somewhere in this world practices or follows the 1 in 7 pattern that God created, the continuous use clause that Satan is trying to claim is broken. And each week that happens, the Sabbath keepers reclaim the earth as God's possession and restart the statute of limitations period. So we can see that the 1 in 7 pattern, the Sabbath rest, is a big deal. No wonder God rested on the seventh day, blessed it, and sanctified it. So now we know that the Sabbath is a big deal to God. But how did it become a big deal in Adventism? For that, we also must go back to the beginning of Adventism. After the Millerite movement's great disappointment on October 22nd, 1844, some ex-Millerites who would become the pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventist movement spent a substantial amount of time in prayer and in the studying of God's Word for a better understanding of the disappointment. But even before that, Rachel Oakes introduced the seventh-day Sabbath to Frederick Wheeler, who became the first Sabbath-keeping Adventist minister. He was a circuit rider, which was a clergyman who traveled on horseback from church to church to preach the gospel. Then, more people started accepting the 1 in 7 pattern. William Farnsworth, the brother-in-law of Rachel Oakes' own daughter, Rachel Delight, made a public statement during a Sunday service saying that the seventh day of the week is the Sabbath, and he would begin to keep it. Immediately after that, Cyrus Farnsworth, Rachel Delight's husband, and many others have decided to keep the seventh-day Sabbath. Thus, the first little group of Sabbatarian Adventists emerged. In the meantime, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Bates read an article on the Sabbath by T.M. Preble and traveled nearly 3,000 miles, all the way from Fairhaven, Massachusetts to Washington State to study with the original Sabbatarians. Bates went on to write his own article on the Sabbath in 1846 and introduced the seventh-day Sabbath rest concept to a young lady by the name of Ellen G. White. It is interesting to know that Ellen White, who would later on become a co-founder of the Seventh-day Adventist movement, did not accept the Sabbath right away. She went home and prayed about it, studied on it, and asked God for clarity on the Sabbath. It was at least a couple of weeks before she received a dream confirming that the seventh-day Sabbath was still binding. And then, and only then, her and her husband James White, who had been married in August of that year, accepted the truth of the Sabbath. And for nearly 10 years, there were disparities among the group on how they should keep the Sabbath. Bates suggested commencing the Sabbath at 6 p.m., and that is what James and Ellen White did. But then there were others who thought it should start at sunrise, sunset, or midnight. In 1855, nearly 10 years later, James White asked J.N. Andrews, a Seventh-day Adventist minister, to do an in-depth study on the Sabbath from the Bible to present it to the rest of the body. Upon completing the study, J.N. Andrews presented his findings at a meeting in Battle Creek, Michigan, which supported keeping the Sabbath from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. Ellen White had a vision after the meeting which confirmed J.N. Andrews' findings, and from then on, everyone was on the same accord about the Sabbath. This is the faith I was born in. I'm a fourth-generation Adventist, and I grew up respecting the Sabbath and knowing that it was a big deal, but I never really understood its true meaning. I have the impression that many who are born in the faith may really be struggling with what the Sabbath is all about. It was more of a burden than an enjoyment, to tell you the truth. Growing up as young Adventists, I remember my brother and I closing the Sabbath early in order to go do what we wanted to do. And after we were done, we would reopen it back up. It was that trivial to us. It was a routine, just something we did. It was a day you learned to appreciate, but you did not want it to stay any longer than it had to. However, as I dug a little deeper in the Bible and connected the dots, the Sabbath took on a whole new other meaning for me. I live past downtown Miami, and to get to where I live, I go through the worst traffic in town. But once I reach my street, which is in a more secluded area, I leave all the chaos behind me, and I feel a breath of fresh air. My street is so much quieter than the others, not too far from the bay, and I feel a sense of relief every time I make that turn. It reminds me of the Sabbath each time, how I leave the 6 days of regular work behind and enter into the seventh day rest. I make that remark to my wife all the time. And so this is what I think of the Sabbath now: a breath of fresh air, a gift from above. And most of the time now, I do not want it to end. I used to think the Sabbath was simply a day to go to church and keep myself busy spiritually, so I did not think of the bad stuff. But now, I realize that I'm not the one who keeps the Sabbath, but the Sabbath keeps me. It keeps me from wandering away from God. I am learning to enjoy the Sabbath more and more each week. I try to make it a fun day for the family. Friday night is a praise party for the kids. We sing, we jump, and we welcome the Sabbath with a joyful noise, and my kids love it. Sabbath during the day, when time permits, we take a walk around the neighborhood, we take a hike by the ocean, or picnic on the green grass, and enjoy nature, and we thank God for it. But I could not have enjoyed it as much as I do now until I understood its true spiritual meaning. I think the notion of rest is more telling than at first look. Beyond the physical rest, the Sabbath is intended for spiritual rest. I believe that this is the reason why God blessed it and sanctified it, and also commands that His children keep it holy. It is supposed to be this universal sign that keeps pointing back to creation. The Sabbath is like a clock telling us of time. From the Sabbath, we may learn about the weeks, the months, the years, and even eras. It lets us know that it is time to cease our self-righteous labor and enter into God's salvific rest. The Sabbath, more than a biblical doctrine, more than a day of rest, more than a denominational mark, is a timeless and ageless godly principle established by God Himself for the betterment of all mankind. I'm so glad that my family and I, we keep the Sabbath. But along with that, it's not us who keep the Sabbath, but the Sabbath keeps us.
Ruben, what was going through your thoughts, your heart, and mind as you researched to present the Sabbath?
When I was researching for this topic, it was like studying it for the first time. Some other parts of my research I didn't really know. So it was really new discoveries for me, but it really felt so refreshing. I was reliving the truth of the Sabbath again and what it really means. And so I thank God for actually understanding and really being able to take in the true meaning of the Sabbath, which is to rest and to really enjoy God's creation.
How can we further make the Sabbath a delight and joy and not a legalistic day that we keep?
Wow, that's something that we all should really try to work on. As I said in my presentation, this is what it used to be for me. It used to be more of a burden than an enjoyment. But over the years, I've learned that the Sabbath wasn't meant just to get our mind busy spiritually and to quote unquote keep the bad stuff away from our minds, but it's a day where we should enjoy family. So I would say just enjoy your family, have different activities, probably things that you don't normally do during the week, as far as like, it's okay to go on a little picnic. It's okay to take a hike or to just walk down the neighborhood. It's all right. Enjoy the Sabbath. It's not meant to just have meetings after meetings and just go to church, but just enjoy nature, because nature really is God's church.
You finished by saying that the Sabbath keeps you. How does the Sabbath keep you?
The Sabbath really keeps me from depending 100% on myself. Because during the week, I feel as if I have to make it, I have to produce, I have to achieve. But on the Sabbath, I get to slow down and trust God and depend on Him. It keeps me from worrying about money, from worrying about trying to make ends meet. On that day, I trust God to fully do His will in my life. And so it keeps me from wandering away from God in that way.